The massive council chamber stretched across 3 levels. It's filled with representatives from hundreds of different alien species. The air hummed with tension as voices rose in heated argument. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Veltar, a tall being with silver skin that seemed to shimmer under the chamber's lights. His large, dark eyes held desperate hope as he spoke to the assembled council members. "Please, honored representatives," Veltar's voice carried across the chamber through universal translators. "My people are dying. The Krillian raiders have destroyed 12 of our settlements in the past month. They show no mercy to our civilians, not even our children." The council members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some whispered among themselves, while others stared at the holographic displays showing the burning cities on Kepler 4-B. The images were horrific. Entire neighborhoods reduced to ash. Escape pods blown apart in space. Families torn apart by an enemy that seemed to kill for sport. Council Prime Vextar, an ancient being with 4 arms and skin like polished stone, raised his staff for silence. "Ambassador Veltar, we understand your pain, but the non-interference doctrine has kept peace in our galaxy for over 10,000 years. We cannot simply abandon our most sacred law." "Sacred law?" Veltar's voice cracked with emotion. "What is sacred about watching innocent people die? We have tried to fight back, but our mining equipment is no match for their warships. We are a peaceful people. We have never even seen weapons like theirs." The debate that followed was fierce. Some species argued for limited aid. Others demanded strict adherence to the ancient rules. The Altrurian representative stood up, his blue skin darkening with anger. "How many civilizations have we watched burn while we sat here talking about laws? How many children have died while we debated?" But the traditionalists held firm. Corvani Delegate, a reptilian being with scales that changed color with his mood, hissed his response. "Interference breeds chaos. One intervention leads to another, and soon we have galactic war. The doctrine exists for good reason." For 3 full days, the debate raged. Outside the chamber, news feeds showed the continuing destruction on Kepler 4-B. Whole cities disappeared under orbital bombardment. Refugee ships fled into space, only to be hunted down like animals. The death toll climbed higher each hour. Meanwhile, thousands of light years away, Captain Hansal Kim cursed as sparks flew from his ship's navigation console. The UES Defiant, a small human exploration vessel, had been mapping star systems near the outer rim when their quantum drive began acting up. What should have been a routine survey mission had turned into a nightmare of mechanical failures. "Sir, we're way off course," reported navigator Lee Sujin, her fingers dancing over the control panel. "The drive malfunction pushed us into uncharted space. I'm not even sure where we are right now." Hansel ran his hand through his black hair and sighed. At 35, he was young for a starship captain, but he had earned his position through skill and determination. The Defiant was his first command. He was proud of his small crew of 23 humans who had volunteered for the dangerous job of deep space exploration. "How long before we can get back on course?" he asked. Engineer Park Minho looked up from where he was working on a damaged circuit board. "At least another day, Captain. Maybe 2 if we run into more problems. This old ship wasn't designed for the kind of stress we've been putting her through." That's when communications officer Yoon De-hee suddenly straightened at her station. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange. It's a transmission, but it's not in any human language." The bridge fell silent as De-hee worked to clean up the signal. The Universal Translator, a device that had been standard on human ships for only a few years, began processing the alien words. Slowly, a desperate voice filled the bridge. "Anyone who can hear this transmission, please help us. We are the Zephyrian colonies of Kepler for 4-B. We are under attack by hostile forces. Our people are dying. If there is anyone out there who can hear this, please help us." The message repeated several times before cutting to static. The bridge. Crew looked at each other in shock. This was first contact with an alien species, something that had never happened in human history. But instead of the peaceful meeting they had always imagined, they were hearing a cry for help from a dying civilization. "Play it again," Hansel ordered quietly, as the desperate plea filled the bridge once more. The crew felt the weight of the moment. They were explorers, not soldiers. Their ship carried scientific equipment, not weapons. They were alone in unknown space, with no backup and no way to call for help. But they were human. And humans had never been good at walking away from people. In need, the UES Defiant raced through the darkness of space, its engines pushed to their limits. Captain Hunsol Kim sat in his command chair, watching the stars streak past on the main screen. 18 hours had passed since they received the desperate alien transmission, and every minute felt like an eternity. Communications officer Yoon Da-hee had barely slept during the journey. She sat hunched over her station, her eyes red from staring at scrolling text as the universal translator worked to decode more alien messages. What she discovered made her stomach turn. "Captain," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been monitoring their communications. This isn't just a raid or an invasion. The Krillians are systematically wiping out every Zephyrian settlement. They're not taking prisoners or stealing resources. They're killing everyone." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the ships. Engines. Hunsol felt a chill run down his spine. In all of human history, they had never encountered anything like this. Wars, yes. Conflicts over territory and resources, certainly. But the complete extermination of an entire species? It was almost too horrible to believe. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. He nodded grimly. "I've translated dozens of their messages. Krillians talk about it like it's a job they need to finish. They have lists of settlements to destroy, population counts to eliminate. They're treating genocide like a business transaction." Across the bridge, weapons specialist Choi Sung-min looked up from where he was working on a disassembled mining laser. His hands were covered in grease and his uniform was stained with oil. "I've been trying to turn our equipment into something that can fight back," he said. "But I have to be honest, Captain. We're a science ship. Our mining lasers are designed to cut through rocks, not enemy armor. Our cargo manipulators can lift heavy objects, but they were never meant to be weapons." He gestured to the improvised weapons he had created. "I've managed to increase the power output on the lasers by about 30%, but that's still nothing compared to real military equipment. And we only have enough power cells for maybe an hour of sustained combat." Dr. Kang Hai-jin, the ship's xenobiologist, had been studying the alien transmissions from a different angle. She was trying to understand the species they were about to help. "From what I can tell," she said, "the Zephyrians have never experienced warfare on this scale. Their messages show complete confusion about why anyone would want to hurt them. They keep asking what they did wrong, why the Krillians hate them so much." She pulled up a holographic display showing the translated messages. "Look at this one. We offered them food and shelter when they first arrived. We thought they were traders or explorers like us. We don't understand why they started killing our families. These people have no concept of unprovoked violence." Navigator Lee Soo-jin worked at her station, plotting their course through the dangerous space ahead. "Captain, we're approaching the edge of the Kepler 442 system. I'm detecting multiple energy signatures. Those must be the Krillian ships." As they drew closer, the full scope of the horror became visible on their screens. The planet Kepler 442b was a beautiful world with blue oceans and green continents. But now, it was scarred by destruction. Massive fires burned across entire continents, and from orbit they could see the geometric patterns of destroyed cities. The Krillians had been thorough in their work. "My God," whispered Engineer Park Minnow, staring at the destruction. "How many people live down there? According to their last census transmission," Da-hee replied, "about 40 million Zephyrians called this planet home." Now, she didn't need to finish the sentence. The tactical display showed 6 large Krillian warships in orbit around the planet. They were sleek, predatory-looking vessels that bristled with weapons. Each one was at least 3 times the size of the Defiant. Smaller fighter craft swarmed around them like angry insects, hunting down any Zephyrian ships that tried to escape. "There," Soo-jin said suddenly, pointing to a cluster of weak signals on the planet's surface. "I'm picking up concentrated life signs in the northern continent. It looks like the survivors have gathered in some kind of underground complex." Hansol studied the tactical display. The remaining Zephyrians had taken shelter in what appeared to be a mining facility built into a mountain range. It was a smart choice. The thick rock would protect them from orbital bombardment, at least for a while, but 3 Krillian ships were already moving into position above the complex. "They're preparing for a final assault," Sungmin observed, watching the enemy ship's movements. "Once they break through that rock, it'll be over." The bridge crew looked at their captain, waiting for his decision. They all knew the odds. A1, small human science ship against 6 alien warships. Improvised weapons against military-grade firepower. A crew of 23 against thousands of enemy soldiers. Hansel took a deep breath and stood up from his chair. "All hands, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We're about to enter combat against superior enemy forces to protect innocent people we've never met. I won't lie to you, our chances aren't good. But sometimes doing the right thing means taking impossible odds." He paused, looking around at his crew. These were good people. Volunteers who had left their families behind to explore the unknown. They had signed up for adventure and discovery, not war. Not one of them suggested turning back. "Prepare for combat," Hansel ordered. "We're going in." Deep beneath the surface of Kepler 4 to B, Elder Thren pressed his pale hands against the cold metal walls of the mining complex. The underground facility had become a tomb for the last survivors of his people. Around him, thousands of Zephyrians huddled in the tunnels, their translucent skin glowing faintly in the dim emergency lighting. His young aide whispered. "The surface sensors are picking up 3 Krillian destroyers moving into attack position. They're charging their bombardment weapons." Thren nodded slowly, his ancient eyes reflecting a lifetime of peaceful existence that was about to end. The Zephyrians had been miners and farmers, explorers and artists. They had never built weapons or trained for war. When the Krillians arrived, they had offered friendship and trade. The systematic slaughter that followed had been beyond their comprehension. "How much time do we have?" Thren asked, though he already knew the answer. "The rock above us is thick, but their weapons are powerful. Maybe an hour before they break through." Children cried in the darkness while their parents held them close. Families that had been scattered across the planet during the initial attacks had found each other in these final hours. At least they would die together. The aide suddenly straightened at his monitoring station. "Elder, something's happening up there. I'm detecting a new ship's signature." On the failing display screens, a small vessel appeared like a dot against the massive Krillian warships. It was barely a fraction of their size, moving with desperate speed toward the enemy fleet. "What are they doing?" the aide whispered. "That ship is tiny." The unknown vessel dove straight at the 3 Krillian destroyers, its movement erratic and unpredictable. The massive enemy ships turned their weapons toward this new threat, but the small craft was too fast and too agile. It weaved between, their attacks like an angry insect, striking at them with weapons that seemed pathetically weak. Above the planet, Captain Hansel Kim gripped his command chair as the Defiant shook under enemy fire. The Krillian ships were enormous, their dark holes bristling with weapons that could vaporize his vessel with a single hit. But something about their size worked against them. They were too slow to track his ship's wild maneuvers. "Song Min, target their weapon arrays," Hansel ordered. "We can't destroy them, but maybe we can slow them down." The improvised weapons fired continuously, their mining lasers carving bright lines across the enemy hulls. The damage was minimal, but it was enough to get their attention. All 3 Krillian ships turned away from the planet to focus on this unexpected threat. "That's it," Hansel muttered. "Come after us. Leave those people alone." But the ships. Weapons were designed for cutting rock, not military armor. The Krillian shields absorbed most of the damage, and Hansel knew they couldn't keep this up much longer. That's when Engineer Park Minho's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, I've got an idea. It's crazy, but it might work. I'm listening. It can rig the cargo bay to explosively decompress. If we ram one of their ships at full speed, the explosion might disable their engines." Hansel felt his heart skip a beat. It was a suicide mission, but it might be their only chance. "Do it." Minho and his team worked frantically to prepare their makeshift weapon. They sealed off the cargo bay and pressurized it far beyond safe limits. When it exploded, it would turn their ship into a massive kinetic projectile. Ramming speed, Hanzal ordered as the Defiant accelerated toward the lead Krillian destroyer. The enemy ship's captain must have thought the humans had lost their minds. Who would deliberately crash into a ship 10 times their size? That's exactly what happened. The Defiant slammed into the destroyer's engine section just as the cargo bay exploded, sending a shockwave through both vessels. The explosion was devastating. The Krillian ship's engines went dark, and emergency lights flickered across its hull. But the Defiant paid a heavy price. The impact nearly tore the ship apart. Hull breach on decks 3, 4, and 5. Communications Officer Dahi shouted over the alarms. We're losing atmosphere fast. Hull integrity down to 60%. Seal the breaches, Hanzal ordered, blood running down his face from where he had hit his head during the impact. And keep fighting. The remaining 2 Krillian ships were now fully focused on the humans. They poured fire into the damaged Defiant, but Navigator Sujin performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. She spun the ship through debris. Fields used the disabled destroyer as cover, somehow kept them alive. Sungmin's weapons found weak points in the enemy hulls, where their armor had been damaged by the explosion. His mining lasers, designed to cut through solid rock, began to penetrate the weakened shields. Sparks flew from the enemy ships as critical systems failed. The battle stretched on for 4 brutal hours. The Defiant was held together by emergency, patches, and sheer determination. Half the crew was injured, and they had lost 3 people when Deck 4 depressurized. But they kept fighting. When the second Krillian ship finally exploded, its destruction lit up the space around the planet like a brief star. The third ship, heavily damaged, and with most of its weapons offline, made the decision to retreat. Limped away into deep space, leaving the humans victorious in the underground complex. Elder Thren stared at the displays in amazement. The impossible had happened. A tiny alien ship had defeated 3 massive warships, saving his people from extinction. But more than that, someone had cared enough to try. Who are they? Zaid asked. I don't know, Thren replied, watching the battered human ship drift in orbit above them. But I think we just witnessed the birth of something new in our galaxy. The small Zephyrian rescue shuttle approached the damaged human vessel with careful precision. Elder Thren watched through the viewport as the alien ship grew larger, its hull scarred and blackened from the recent battle. Emergency lights flickered across its surface, and he could see where sections had been hastily patched with metal plates. Are you sure it's safe to board? Asked his pilot, a young Zephyrian named Keth, whose hands trembled slightly on the controls. They just saved our entire species, Thren replied softly. I think we can trust them. The docking procedure was awkward, since neither species had ever attempted to connect their ships before.
8.
It took 20 minutes of careful maneuvering with both crews working together through translated communications before the airlocks finally sealed. When the doors opened, Thren got his first look at the beings who had risked everything for his people. The humans were shorter than Zephyrians, their skin solid and opaque rather than translucent. But their eyes held the same determination. He had seen in their battle tactics. Captain Hanzal Kim stepped forward, his blue uniform torn and stained with blood. A bandage covered a gash on his forehead, and his left arm hung in a makeshift sling. Behind him, his crew looked equally battered, but stood with quiet pride. You came, Thren said, the universal translator, converting his words into human speech. You risked everything for strangers. Hanzal nodded simply. We heard your call for help. The words were so matter-of-fact, so human in their simplicity, that Thren felt tears forming in his large, dark eyes. In all his centuries of life, he had never heard anything so beautiful. I am Elder Thren of the Zephyrian colonies, he said formally. In the name of all my people, I thank you for our lives. Captain Hanzal Kim, of the United Earthship Defiant, the human replied. We're just glad we could help. Dr. Kang Hai-jin appeared from deeper in the ship, her medical bag in hand. She had been treating the wounded for hours, and exhaustion showed in her face. When she saw the Zephyrian delegation, her scientific curiosity immediately sparked. "Are any of your people injured?" she asked. "We've set up a medical bay and cargo hold too." What followed was the most remarkable cultural exchange in galactic history. The makeshift medical bay became a place where two species learned about each other through the universal language of healing. Dr. Hajin worked alongside Zephyrian medics, sharing human medical techniques while learning about their natural healing abilities. "Your cellular regeneration is incredible," Hajin said, as she watched a Zephyrian healer repair damaged tissue with just the touch of his hands. "How do you do that?" "It's not magic," explained the healer, whose name was Vieron. "We channel bioelectrical energy through our nervous system. But your surgical techniques are far more advanced than anything we've developed." The wounded from both species lay side by side in the medical bay. Human crew members with broken bones rested next to Zephyrian survivors with energy burns. The barriers between species seemed to dissolve as they helped each other heal. In the ship's damaged engineering section, weapons specialist Choi Seung-min worked alongside fascinated Zephyrian engineers to repair critical systems. The aliens marveled at human technology while sharing their own innovations. "Your power systems are so compact," observed a Zephyrian engineer named Tala. "We've never seen anything like these quantum batteries." "Thanks," Seung-min replied, wiping grease from his hands. "But your mineral extraction techniques are incredible. No wonder you built such an advanced civilization." As they worked together, Elder Thren shared something that shocked the humans. "In 10,000 years of galactic history," he explained, "no species has ever answered a distress call from another world. The Galactic Council forbids it." Han Sol looked up from where he was helping repair a damaged console. "The Council forbids helping people in trouble? They call it the non-interference doctrine," Thren said sadly. "They believe that getting involved in other species' problems leads to chaos and war. So they made a law that no one can help anyone else." Seung-min stopped working and stared at the elder. "Your council sounds like they need better priorities."
Many
"Of us have thought the same thing," Thren admitted. "But the council has ruled the galaxy for millennia. No one has ever challenged their authority." Meanwhile, word of the rescue was spreading across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. On hundreds of worlds, beings who had never heard of humanity suddenly learned that somewhere in the void, species existed that would risk everything for strangers. On the water world of Aquatica, the dolphin-like cetaceans discussed the news. In their underwater cities, they saved people they had never met. Clicked their prime minister. Such a thing is unprecedented. In the crystal caves of Minerva, the rocketing lithoids buzzed with excitement. The small mammals fought ships 10 times their size. They rumbled. Such courage is beyond our understanding. But it was on the council homeworld that the news had the biggest impact. Emergency sessions were called as representatives from hundreds of species tried to understand what had happened. The ancient chamber that had known only debate and bureaucracy suddenly buzzed with questions no one knew how to answer. "How is this possible?" demanded Council Prime Vextar. "They're a primitive species. They don't even have warp drive technology." "Primitive or not," replied the Alturian representative, "they did something we've never done. They helped." The galaxy had just learned that everything they thought they knew about civilization was wrong. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, a species had proven that sometimes the right thing to do was also the most dangerous thing to do. Everything was about to change. The ancient council chamber stretched across an entire city block, walls reaching toward the sky like frozen lightning. For over 10,000 years, this had been the seat of galactic government. Representatives from hundreds of worlds came to debate and decide the fate of civilizations. But today, the chamber was in complete chaos. Voices rose in dozens of different languages as representatives argued with an intensity that hadn't been seen in centuries. Yet the universal translators worked overtime, creating a cacophony of overlapping conversations that echoed off the crystal walls. Some delegates pounded their desks with fists, tentacles, or claws, while others gestured wildly with their various appendages. Outside the chamber, something unprecedented was happening. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy had gathered. in the streets holding signs and chanting in their native languages. The protesters came from dozens of species, tall, graceful Alturians with their blue skin. The rock-like lithoids, whose bodies sparkled in the sunlight.
Ow.
And even some Corvani, whose reptilian scales changed color with their emotions. Justice. For the humans, they chanted, heroes, not criminals. Inside the chamber, Council Prime Vexstar struggled to maintain order. The ancient being had ruled the council for over 3 centuries, his forearms and stone-like skin making him an imposing figure. But today, for the first time in his long reign, he seemed to be losing control. "Order!" he shouted, slamming his ceremonial staff against the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like thunder. "We will have order in this assembly." At the center of the chaos stood the Zephyrian delegation, led by Elder Thren, the tall, graceful beings with their translucent skin seemed to glow with inner light as they faced the assembled representatives. Thren stepped forward to address the council, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "Honored representatives," he began, "I stand before you as a survivor. 3 days ago, my people faced extinction. The Krillian raiders had destroyed our cities, murdered our families, and were preparing to eliminate the last of our species. We sent out a distress call, knowing it was forbidden, because we had nothing left to lose." The chamber fell silent. As Thren continued, "The humans could have ignored our call. They could have followed your laws and let us die. Instead, they chose to fight and die for beings they'd never met. They risked everything to save strangers." A murmur ran through the assembly. Some representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others nodded in agreement. The weight of Thren's words was undeniable. "The humans had no obligation to help us," Thren said, his voice growing stronger. "They gained nothing by saving us. They knew they might die in the attempt. But they came anyway, because they believed that life has value regardless of species or origin." Council Prime Vexstar's 4 arms gestured impatiently. "Order. The primitive species will answer for their violation of galactic law. Captain Kim, step forward." Captain Hansel, Kim walked to the center of the chamber, his footsteps echoing in the sudden silence. He still bore the scars from the battle. A healing cut on his forehead, his left arm still in a sling. His uniform had been cleaned and pressed, but nothing could hide the evidence of what he had endured. The human looked small and fragile compared to the massive alien representatives surrounding him. But there was something in his posture, something in the way he stood straight and met their eyes, that commanded respect. "Captain Kim Vexstar," said formally, "you stand accused of violating the non-interference doctrine. It's engaging in unauthorized military action and disrupting galactic peace. How do you answer these charges?" Hansel looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from across the galaxy. When he spoke, his words were simple and direct. "We did what anyone should do. We helped." The chamber erupted in voices again, but this time it was different. The Altrurian representative, a tall being with skin like polished sapphire, stood up from his seat. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "In our histories," he said, his words carrying the weight of centuries, "we record 17 distress calls from dying worlds. 17 times we followed council protocol and did nothing. 17 entire species died while we debated procedure and worried about precedent." The chamber fell silent again. The Altrurian's confession hung in the air like a physical presence, and other representatives began to shift uncomfortably. The weight of millennia of inaction was finally being acknowledged. The Bendari representative, a bear-like creature with thick fur and sad eyes, rose next. "We remember the famine on Kepler 7, she said slowly. "We had surplus food, transport ships, everything needed to help. But the council said it would interfere with their natural development. 3 billion beings starved while we watched." More voices joined the chorus of confession. Corvani spoke of plagues they could have cured. Cetaceans remembered floods they could have prevented. The lithoids recalled mining accidents they could have stopped. For the first time in millennia, the council was forced to confront the moral weight of their decisions. The law exists for stability, Vexstar insisted, his voice growing desperate. Interference breeds chaos. It leads to war, to the breakdown of order. The doctrine has kept peace for 10,000 years. Hanzal looked at the Council Prime with steady eyes. Maybe, he replied quietly, but letting people die breed something. Worse, the words hung in the air like a challenge. Around the chamber, representatives who had spent centuries debating abstract principles were suddenly forced to confront the reality of their choices. They had chosen order over compassion, stability over justice, peace over the lives of those who needed help. Outside, the crowd of protesters grew larger. Their chants could be heard even through the thick crystal walls of the chamber. For the first time in galactic history, ordinary beings were demanding that their governments do more than just maintain the status quo. The galaxy was about to learn that. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is the right thing. The emergency session of the Galactic Council lasted for 7 straight days. Representatives argued, debated, and pleaded their cases while the galaxy watched through live broadcasts. When the final vote was called, the results shattered 10,000 years of unity. 173 species voted to support humanity's actions and form what they called the Covenant of Aid. 174 species voted to maintain the traditional non-interference doctrine under the Stability Pact. The galaxy was split almost perfectly down the middle. On Earth, President Nam Ju-woo stood before the United Nations General Assembly in New York. The cameras captured every word as she addressed not just humanity, but the entire galaxy that was watching. 3 weeks ago, we were alone in the universe, she said, her voice steady despite the weight of history on her shoulders. Today, we find ourselves at the center of a galactic crisis. We never asked to be the galaxy's conscience. We never wanted to challenge ancient laws or divide civilizations. But if that's what we've become, we'll bear that responsibility. She paused, looking out at the assembled delegates from every nation on Earth. We will not abandon our principles. We will not ignore cries for help. If that makes us dangerous to the established order, then so be it. The speech was broadcast across human space and beyond. In the outer colonies, miners and farmers watched on public screens. In the military academies, cadets stood at attention as their instructors played the recording. Humanity was no longer just exploring space, they were about to reshape it. Within hours of the president's speech, Admiral Seo Jae-soon received his new orders. The veteran officer had spent 30 years in the Earth Defense Fleet, but nothing had prepared him for this assignment. He was to create and command the fleet of Mercy, a rapid response force designed to answer distress calls from anywhere in the galaxy. Every vessel answers distress calls, he told his assembled captains during their first briefing. No exceptions. I don't care if it's a Zephyrian colony under attack or a Krillian ship in distress. We help anyone who needs help. The fleet. Mercy was hastily assembled from whatever ships could be spared. Cargo vessels were retrofitted with medical bays. Mining ships were equipped with rescue equipment. Even passenger liners were converted into hospital ships. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. The first test came sooner than anyone expected. At Proxima Centauri, a mining accident had trapped thousands of hegemony workers deep underground. The massive alien beings who looked like walking boulders were slowly suffocating as their oxygen supply ran out. The Stability Pact's response was immediate and predictable. The hegemony must solve this problem themselves, declared their Emergency Council. Any interference would violate the non-interference doctrine. But Captain Osuman's rescue ship was already on its way. The young officer had volunteered for the Fleet of Mercy, despite knowing it would probably end her regular military career. We're not asking permission, she told her crew as they entered the Proxima system. We're saving lives. The rescue operation was a masterpiece of cooperation. Human drilling equipment, designed for asteroid mining, cut through the collapsed tunnels. Alturian medics, with their natural healing abilities, treated the injured workers. Zephyrian engineers used their mineral expertise to stabilize the unstable mine shafts. When the last hegemony worker was pulled from the wreckage, the massive alien leader approached Captain Osuman. Why? He asked through the universal translator. Why did you risk your lives for us? Because that's what people do, she replied simply. We help each other. The Proxima Centauri rescue was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, similar incidents began happening with increasing frequency. The Bendari, those bear-like beings, who had confessed to letting billions starve, began organizing massive food shipments to famine-stricken worlds. The Corvani, with their advanced medical knowledge, started sharing plague cures with former enemies. Each act of aid created new bonds between species that had never worked together before. The Eltrorians and humans developed new medical techniques. The Zephyrians and Bendari created better food distribution systems. The Corvani and Cetaceans collaborated on disease prevention programs. Dr. Kung Hai-jin, now heading the Interspecies Medical Exchange, watched the transformation from her new headquarters on the Zephyrian homeworld. We're witnessing the birth of a new galactic civilization, she observed during a video conference with medical teams across the galaxy. One built on compassion instead of fear. But not everyone was happy with these changes. Stability Pact viewed each rescue mission as a dangerous precedent. They began organizing their own response, mobilizing fleets and resources to counter what they saw as galactic chaos. The humans are destroying everything we've built, warned Council Prime Vexstar during a closed session of Stability Pact leaders. Their reckless interventions will lead to war, just as we've always predicted. The irony was lost on him that, by opposing humanitarian aid, the Stability Pact was actually creating the very conflict they claimed to prevent. Across their territories, military buildups began. Weapons were manufactured. Alliances were formed. The galaxy was preparing for its first war in millennia, and the cause was humanity's refusal to let people die when they could be saved. The choice was becoming clear: compassion or control, hope or fear, the old way or the human way. Deep in the command centers of the Stability Pact, military planners worked day and night preparing for what they believed was inevitable. They had decided that if humanity wouldn't accept the natural order, it would have to be forced to comply. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the price of doing the right thing is having to fight for the right to keep doing it. The first shots of the Galactic Civil War rang out in the vegan system, where a massive earthquake had shattered the planet's surface. Millions of beings were trapped under collapsed buildings, their cries for help echoing across space through emergency transmitters. The Stability Pact's response was swift and merciless. They blockaded the entire system. No ships in or out, declared Admiral Korth, the Stability Pact commander. His fleet of 60 warships formed a barrier around the dying planet. The vegans must solve their own problems. That is the law. But Captain Kim Tae-won's relief convoy was already approaching the system. The human officer commanded 12 ships loaded with rescue equipment, medical supplies, and volunteer rescue teams from 6 different species. When they reached the blockade, Korth's fleet moved to intercept. Human vessels, you are in violation of Stability Pact orders, came the transmission. Turn back immediately or face the consequences. Kim Tae-won looked at the massive enemy fleet blocking his path. Behind him, he could hear the vegan distress calls growing weaker. People were dying while politicians played games with their lives. Negative, he replied. We're going through. The first energy blast struck his lead ship, the Busan, sending it spinning out of control. Within seconds, the space around Vega erupted in weapons fire. The Galactic Civil War had begun. The news reached Earth within hours. President Nam Ji-woo stood in the emergency command center deep beneath Seoul, watching the tactical displays with growing horror. The Stability Pact wasn't just opposing rescue missions. They were actively preventing aid from reaching people in need. Ma'am, reported Defense Minister Park Sung-ho, we're detecting massive fleet movements toward the Sol system. It looks like they're planning to blockade Earth itself. The attack came at dawn, Earth time. Over 300 Stability Pact warships emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Their formation was perfect, their weapons charged, their intent clear. They were going to cut off humanity's homeworld and force a surrender, but Earth wasn't defenseless. Hastily constructed orbital defense platforms, built in just 3 months by volunteers from across the galaxy, stood ready. Human engineers. had worked alongside Alturian technicians, Zephyrian miners, and Bendari warriors to create a defensive network unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "All platforms, this is Admiral Jae-sung," came the voice from the command station. "Hold your positions. Protect the evacuation routes. Every civilian ship that escapes means hope for the future." The battle for Earth lasted 18 hours.
Captain.
Lee Young-ho's destroyer squadron fought a running battle through the asteroid belt, protecting the massive civilian transports trying to escape the system. His ship, the Soul, took hit after hit while shielding the evacuation convoy. "Sir, we're losing atmosphere on 3 decks," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Cho Minacio. "Hull integrity is down to 40%. "Keep firing," Young-ho ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Every ship that gets through means more lives saved." The Soul's weapons blazed continuously, targeting the enemy ships. Trying to break through their defensive line, round them, the space was filled with debris from destroyed vessels, both human and alien. The cost of this war was becoming clear. It would be measured in the lives of good people on both sides. But something remarkable was happening across the galaxy. The Ultrarians, with their vast industrial capacity, had joined their production facilities with human innovation. New technologies emerged from their cooperation, weapons that could disable instead of destroy, shields that could protect civilian populations, medical equipment that could save lives on battlefields, the Bendari.
Else.
Those bear-like beings whose ancestors had been great warriors, shared their ancient combat traditions with human tactical flexibility. The result was a new kind of warfare, one that focused on protecting the innocent rather than destroying the enemy. In the Outer Rim territories, Dr. Kong Haijin's medical stations became beacons of hope in the darkness. The former xenobiologist had transformed her research facilities into trauma centers that treated wounded from both sides of the conflict. "We didn't start this war," she told her mixed staff of human doctors and alien healers as another shipment of wounded arrived, "but we'll heal whoever comes through those doors." A wounded, stability-packed soldier is still someone's son or daughter. The medical stations became neutral ground where enemies worked together to save lives. Human surgeons learned Alturian healing techniques. Zephyrian medics shared their knowledge of alien physiology, even captured stability-packed personnel found themselves working alongside their former enemies to treat the wounded. The galaxy was burning, but something new was being forged in the flames. The Covenant of Aid wasn't just fighting a war, they were proving that a civilization based on compassion could survive even the darkest times. Every life saved, every rescue mission completed, every act of mercy reinforced their belief that doing the right thing was worth any cost. But the Stability Pact was growing desperate. Their traditional tactics weren't working against an enemy that refused to abandon their principles. In the deep space command centers, military planners were developing new strategies, ones that would test humanity's resolve in ways they had never imagined. The price of heroism was about to become even higher. The war between the Covenant of Aid and the Stability Pact had raged for 3 brutal years. Entire star systems had become battlegrounds, and the galaxy's resources were stretched to their limits. Both sides had suffered terrible losses, but neither was willing to surrender their principles. Then something changed everything. Deep space. Monitoring stations at the galaxy's edge began detecting strange readings. The energy signatures were unlike anything in their databases, massive, ancient, and moving with terrifying purpose toward the inhabited systems. Lieutenant Commander Yuhai Rim was on duty at the Outer Rim monitoring station when the first clear readings came through. She stared at her screens in disbelief before rushing to contact her superiors. "Sir, you need to see this," she told Captain Bae Dongmin, her voice shaking. "The readings are off the charts. Whatever's out there, it's huge, and it's heading straight for us." The data streams that followed painted a picture of absolute horror. Entire star systems were simply vanishing from the galactic map, not destroyed, erased as if they had never existed at all. The ancient enemy that had driven galactic civilization inward 10,000 years ago had returned. The Devourers were back. Dr. Kang Haijin was in her medical facility on the rim world of Haven when the emergency broadcasts began. She watched the holographic displays with growing terror as the scope of the threat became clear. "They're not just destroying planets," she reported to the emergency command center on Earth. "They're unmaking the very fabric of space-time. Whole solar systems are being consumed, leaving nothing but empty void behind." The news spread across the galaxy faster than the approaching threat. On both sides of the Civil War, military commanders realized that their petty conflicts meant nothing in the face of extinction. The Devourers didn't care about politics or principles. They simply consumed everything in their path. The Galactic Council's response was predictably disastrous. Their rigid command structure, designed for maintaining order among peaceful species, collapsed under the pressure of coordinating a defense against an existential threat. Orders contradicted each other, fleets were sent to the wrong systems, and precious time was wasted on bureaucratic procedures. "We need unified command," Admiral Co. Jae-sung told the emergency session of both the Covenant and the Stability Pact. "Every ship, every resource, every being in the galaxy working together. It's our only chance." But the Covenant of Aid had spent 3 years building something the Council never had. A network of allies bound by mutual trust and shared sacrifice. When Admiral Jae-sung sent out the call for help, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Captain Kim Tae-hyun was commanding a patrol squadron near the vegan system when the orders came through. His tactical officer, a young Alturian named Velkash, looked up from his console with surprise. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from a Stability Pact fleet. They're requesting permission to join our defensive formation." Jae-sung looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy. The Devourer's scouts were already probing the outer systems, their dark ships moving like shadows through space. This was no time for old grudges. "Granted," he replied without hesitation. "Today we're not fighting each other, we're fighting for existence itself." The first major battle took place at the Centauri Nebula, where Admiral Jae-sung had positioned his combined fleet to make their stand. The force that assembled there was unprecedented in galactic history. Ships from dozens of species, crews who had been enemies just days before, all working together with a single purpose. Captain Park Min-jun commanded the cruiser Dejin, a vessel that had been heavily damaged in the Civil War, but hastily repaired for this final battle. His crew was a mix of humans, Alturians, and even some former Stability Pact personnel who had volunteered to serve. "Contact ahead," reported his sensor officer. "The Devourers are coming through the nebula." The enemy ships were things of nightmare, dark, organic-looking vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved with unnatural grace, their hulls pulsing with an energy that made reality itself ripple around them. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human tactical doctrine, with its emphasis on flexibility and improvisation, merged with Alturian engineering precision, Bindari warrior spirit combined with Zephyrian technical expertise. Even the rigid formations of the former Council species proved valuable when adapted to the new cooperative command structure. When Captain Park Min-chan's cruiser was overwhelmed by 3 Devourer ships, something beautiful happened. Without orders, without hesitation, vessels from 6 different species moved to protect the damaged human ship. Alturian fighters provided cover, while Bindari heavy cruisers poured fire into the enemy. A Zephyrian hospital ship risked destruction to evacuate the wounded. "This is how it should have been all along," Elder Thren observed from the bridge of the Joint Command vessel. The old Zephyrian had survived the genocide that started this whole conflict, and now he was witnessing its ultimate resolution. Not fear dividing us, but hope uniting us. The battle raged for hours. Ships were lost, heroes fell, but the line held. When the Devourer scouts finally retreated back into the nebula, the combined fleet had achieved something impossible. They had stopped the unstoppable enemy, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. The main Devourer fleet was still out there, consuming entire star systems as it approached the galactic core. The real test was yet to come. For the first time in galactic history, every species was truly united. The Civil War was over, ended not by victory or defeat, but by the recognition that survival required cooperation. The galaxy had learned that sometimes the greatest threats come not from within, but from the darkness between the stars. And in that darkness, hope was the only weapon that mattered. The final battle against the Devourers would be remembered as the moment the galaxy truly became one. At the galactic core, where ancient stars burned brightest and space itself was twisted by massive gravitational forces, every surviving ship in the galaxy gathered for humanity's last stand. Admiral Hugh J. Soon stood on the bridge of the command vessel, watching the tactical displays as fleets from hundreds of worlds took their positions. Human destroyers flew alongside Altrorian battleships. Zephyrian hospital ships moved in formation with Bendari heavy cruisers. Even former Council species had sent their best vessels, their crews working under human officers who had learned to speak the languages of hope, so reported Captain Nosumwuk. All fleets are in position. We have over 10,000 ships ready for battle. The Devourer main fleet emerged from the void like a living nightmare. Their ships were massive, organic things that seemed to pulse with dark energy. They moved through space like predators, consuming the very stars as they passed. Reality itself seemed to bend around them, creating ripples in space-time that hurt. To look at all ships, this is Admiral Jay's Hone. His voice carried across the fleet. Today we fight not for territory or resources, but for the right to exist. Today, we prove that cooperation is stronger than consumption, that hope is more powerful than fear. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. The Devourer's weapons could unmake matter itself, but they had never faced an enemy that fought with such perfect coordination. Human tactical flexibility combined with alien strengths created strategies that the ancient enemy couldn't understand. When Devourer ships tried to isolate and consume individual vessels, entire fleet moved to protect them. When the enemy attempted to break through the defensive lines, species that had never worked together before coordinated their attacks with precision that amazed even their commanders. Captain Lee Jamin's fighter squadron, made up of pilots from 6 different species, flew impossible maneuvers through the enemy formations. His wingman, an Altrurian named Zethkar, had never flown with humans before the war began. Now they moved as one, anticipating each other's actions with perfect trust. The big one's charging its primary weapon, Zethkar reported, his translated voice crackling through the comm system. See it, Jamin replied, banking his fighter toward the massive Devourer ship. Let's show them what teamwork looks like. The ancient enemy fell not to superior weapons, to something they had never encountered, the unprecedented cooperation of beings who had chosen to trust each other completely. The Devourers had consumed countless civilizations, but they had never faced one that refused to abandon their principles even in the face of extinction. When the last Devourer ship finally collapsed into nothingness, the galaxy celebrated as one. The cheers that echoed across the communication channels came in dozens of languages, but they all meant the same thing. Hope had won. In the aftermath, the old order was gone forever. The Galactic Council dissolved without ceremony, its ancient chambers empty for the first time in millennia. In its place rose the Alliance of Worlds, a government where every species had a voice and every voice mattered. The founding charter was written in simple words that Captain Hansel Kim would have recognized. No one who calls for help will be abandoned. Admiral Jae Seung, now First Admiral of the Alliance Fleet, established the new protocols from his headquarters on Earth. Every ship in the Alliance fleet carried medical supplies and rescue equipment. Every crew trained in both warfare and mercy. The galaxy's new guardians were warriors who fought not for conquest, but for the right of all beings to live free from fear. On Earth, now the Alliance capital, President Nam Ji-woo dedicated the Memorial of Answered Calls. The names of every being who had died helping strangers were etched in quantum crystal, their light visible from orbit. The memorial bore a simple inscription. They heard the call, and they answered. Captain Hansal Kim, promoted to admiral despite his protests, commanded the new frontier fleets. The man who had started it all by answering a single distress call now led the ships that patrolled the galaxy's edge, their sensors always listening for the next cry for help. The Defiant, rebuilt and upgraded, served as his flagship. The old exploration vessel had been transformed into a symbol of hope, its hull bearing the scars of countless battles and the pride of a galaxy that had learned to care. Sir, reported Communications Officer Yundahi during a routine patrol along the Galactic Rim, were receiving a distress signal. It's coming from the Andromeda Galaxy, Hansal smiled, remembering another desperate call years ago that had changed everything. The message was faint, distorted by the vast distance between galaxies. But the universal translator was already working to decode it. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, people were calling for help. "Set course for the source," he ordered, his voice filled with the same quiet determination that had started this whole journey. "We're answering that call." Behind them, the galaxy they had changed continued its work. Medical ships raced to disaster zones, their crews ready to heal anyone who needed help. Rescue fleets stood ready at strategic points, prepared to respond to any emergency. And everywhere, beings who had learned to hope looked up at the stars, knowing that somewhere in the void, someone was listening. The age of indifference was over. The age of humanity had begun. And across the universe, the simple message that had started it all continued to echo. Anyone who can hear this, help us. The answer would always be the same. We hear you. We're coming.